Aren't you that fantastic lawyer who got that amazing settlement for that woman who shot her billionaire husband?
This man's stalking me.
Guys, let me out of here, please. That's my wife. She needs a kidney. I've decided to give her mine.
I'm excited to see you too.
Get out.
Is that any way to speak to someone who's about to make you the most talked about attorney in New York? It's okay, driver, you can drive, just a lover's spat.
No, driver. We are not lovers.
Well, not this minute, but it's early.
I am not talking to you. You are not a good friend.
Why? Because I won't renege on a professional commitment the second you snap your fingers? And for the record, I am a great friend. I am a fantastic friend. I am the Rachel of friends, if Rachel were a boy.
You used to be so smart.
That notwithstanding, I'd like to proffer a settlement from Clayton Communications and the Clayton family.
Well, you could save your breath because we are not interested in settling.
But you haven't heard the offer.
I don't need to hear the offer.
Take $1 million
You take $1 million.
and multiply it by 500. Wait, my mistake. Let me put it another way. Take $1 billion and divide it in half.
Is this for real?
Doesn't get any realer. Call your client. Tell her the good news.
Actually, I'm on my way to see her right now. We can tell her together.
So, moving into the second season, this show, Bull, is loosely inspired by Dr. Phil's early days, right? I'm wondering, when are we going to see the syndicated talk show part of this show? When is he going to get a syndicated talk show?
I don't know. That's a good question for writers.
That's why you brought him here, isn't it? Just to throw to him consistently.
Yeah. I mean, my answer on this, so Phil McGraw, for those of you who don't know, but he came to our attention through this woman called Oprah. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but anyway, Oprah for president. So Oprah was involved in this trial with the cattle industry, and it had to do with meat, and it was very messy, and she was in dire need of someone who could help her understand the jury. Particularly, Phil McGraw had a company called CSI, and he joined forces with this unknown McGraw, had created this company, and he got Oprah off the tenterhook. And she was like, what do you do? What is this job? So cut to, we now all know who Dr. Phil is, but what Jason Bull does on this TV show for a living is he's created a company much like Dr. Phil did, and we're using Dr. Phil's perspective on this part of jury trials and his understanding of all the machinations behind the curtain, and it's deeply fascinating. I mean, we all get, you guys don't, but there's a jury summons that sometimes comes through the mail. Have you done a lot of jury duty?
I've gone a number of times, but never actually served.
Same. Oh, I went once, but I didn't serve. It was fascinating to be there for a couple of days. That's a really incredible experience.
Yeah, and I was called for jury duty when we wrapped last year in May, and for some reason they didn't select me for the jury. I don't know why.
Wait, can I ask you a question? What is it like to be a sort of a person who's on television numerous times a year, basically, essentially a famous person, and be doing jury duty?
I don't know. I do remember going to do jury duty 15 years ago or so, and Gray Davis was then governor, and I guess he had just left the governor's seat, and there he was doing jury duty. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. I mean, I guess
can't get out of it now.
Can't get out of it. You can imagine that Tom Hanks is on jury duty, and people are like, you know, you look just like Tom Hanks, except, of course, he looks a lot better. Because that's the thing that always happens to me. When people come up to me and go, you look like that guy on NCIS, but you're older and fatter. I always thank people for that. I'm like, well, yes, growing old on television. It's fun.
Talk about the atmosphere that you guys have created with Bull and how it started, because one of the things that I love about it is that it's not just a procedural, it's also in many ways a screwball comedy, and I think that has to do with your character's personality. Just that scene that we watched felt very much like dialogue you would see out of a screwball comedy of the 30s and 40s, very
And
like
I
His
think
Girl
that-
Friday-ish.
Yeah, that Rosalind Russell, Cary Grant thing is something that Glenn Gordon Caron you are particularly good at that, sir. Some of that,
thanks.
The Hawksian comedy, and when you were doing Moonlighting, that was one of the things people talked about was your dialogue and how.
Yeah. And I have no idea where it comes from. It just.
Were you not a Hawks fan?
True story. When I wrote the pilot for Moonlighting, I met with Sybil Shepherd in a restaurant, and she was the first one to say that to me. She said, "Oh, this is a Hawksian comedy," and I had no idea what a Hawksian comedy was. So. And then I went home, and for those of you who don't know what a Hawksian comedy is a comedy that was done in the 30s and 40s. There was a fantastic director named Howard Hawks, and he made all these screwball comedies.
Arguably one of the best.
Yes. Yeah. And what was great about him, and I think something that I aspire to, and I think Michael aspires to as an actor, is as great as his comedies were equally as great as his dramas were. You couldn't pigeonhole him. He just knew how to be entertaining, which is, like I say, I think something we aspire to on the show.
And one of his great quotes was that all a movie needs is 3 great scenes and no bad ones. Right? I'm wondering if you ever think about a TV script that way as well. Like, what does a TV script need? Because you've going back to Moonlighting even before, you've been in television for so long and you've made films. But what does a TV script need to be a great TV script? Do you have rules?
I don't have rules. No, I sort of feel my way through it like a song. But the main thing is it needs to make sense. So much of the television that we watch now is kind of, I call it haiku, which is to say the audience sort of sits back and we present some scenes, and a lot of the scenes are very familiar. So that the sort of compact between the audience and the show is, well, you know what this is.
Yeah.
We don't have to do a lot of detail because you know what this is. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I want your eyeballs glued to the set. I want you to feel things. I want you to get annoyed. I want you to laugh. I want you to be moved. That doesn't always happen, but that's what we aspire to.
Well, that's such a strange thing that you bring up, and I don't know if we should hold on to it too long, but I'm fascinated by this idea, and it's something that I've always noticed, which is that, yes, we are in this sort of postmodern age of television watching where everything has sort of kind of been done and is referential to something that we know has been done. So it's like you said, people can just kind of be like, oh, I don't really need to, I can have it on in the background and essentially know what part of the show I'm in right now, which I'd imagine is like sort of trying to break through white noise as a television writer.
Right, and I think from a business point of view, certainly networks are content with that because they don't care if you're an active participant or a passive participant as long as it's on and your eyes are vaguely in the same room. We can charge advertisers for that. But
we used to be able to kick up the volume on the advertisers as well.
Exactly, but as a storyteller, I'm way too big an egomaniac to just allow the stuff to wash over people. So I try, and the cool thing about Michael and I have only been working together since last March. But the cool thing about it is I think we both have the same goals. We both really want to entertain people in a vigorous way for 42 minutes if we can.
Right, and a lot of that comes from flaws. A lot of that comes from not creating this perfect Easter Island statue in a suit who's this impenetrable, always right, always winning, superhuman. When I was doing NCIS, one of the great things that I learned and was a total joy to me with the character that I played there was I could ad-lib. Don Belisario let me ad-lib because he saw, at first he wouldn't, and he would scream and yell at me. But I was ad-libbing because I felt, just like what you're saying, I felt that everything was a trope and everything was so expected and everyone knew what everyone was going to say. And I just wanted to blow that up. So
the most minor way just to feel it, I bet.
So if somebody had a paragraph that was gobbledygook, that was taken straight from the script, treatment and just put into dialogue, but it was prose. It wasn't, nobody thought about how a human being would say it. That was, somebody memorized it and then said it, and I would say, wow, you said that almost like you memorized it. And, when you ad-lib that to another actor inside a scene, you don't become popular, I will tell you. But
How many
Sean,
actors did you have? Like you'd say, "Oh, fuck you, Michael."
Sean Murray, Cody DePablo, Sasha Alexander, and Mark Harmon, most notably. I was goofing around on one of the early episodes, and in the middle of the scene, he just hit the back of my head and gave me a slap, which I did deserve. I mean, human resources would argue that maybe there was, it was inappropriate, but this was the early 2000s. You could still get away with it. That head slap became part of the show for almost a decade. And it was that was like a screwball element inside the show. Now, the difference for me now is inside Bull, I don't change a word. I say everything this man writes because I find part of the way my brain works is I'm a lateral thinking person. So everything becomes synonyms and everything becomes this relative of something else. And I find these like sporadic correlations, boom, and it happens to me, and I improv. But he's already done that, writing it. He's already had all those thoughts that I would have about how commonplace the thing I'm saying is. So thank you for doing all that work beforehand. So now I just have to memorize it, and it makes my job a lot easier. I still look tired, though. I don't know why that is. I'm working on it. I'll try and exercise more.
Could you, would you?
And drink less. No, I won't.
Glenn, you said you came onto the show in March, right?
Yes.
And it's a rarity, I will say, for a writer from the show, showrunners, to come on with the lead of the show. So I'm wondering, sort of, have you found that since March, the two of you have found like a really good collaboration, and that the show is just as much both of yours, and that's sort of...
It's worse than that. We met, Michael flew back to Los Angeles, which is where I live, I want to say in February. We met in February. I want to say we met for about 4 hours, and I think about 17 minutes into that 4 hours, we both kind of knew that it would probably be a really good marriage, at least for a little while. And
until your points vest, and then he's gone. Then he's going to have 2 suitcases full of money. You just, what was that, Romancing the Stone? You're just going to be out of there with Danny DeVito.
And what was going on with the show when, like, just before you met with Glenn?
Well, I think that so this show was created by Phil McGraw and Paul Attanasio as a pilot. Paul Attanasio was involved with House and Homicide and lots of
Procedural.
Lots of films like
That's
Quiz
it.
Show,
Homicide is one of
Donnie
the great shows of all
Brasco.
time.
Yeah, I mean, Paul's an incredible writer and an
very gifted
incredibly
guy.
intelligent guy. He partnered with Phil McGraw about this world of trial science. Rodrigo Garcia, who's a great director, directed the pilot, and then everybody left. I mean, Phil did stick around, but Phil doesn't do this. Phil does a different thing.
Please tell me Dr. Phil wrote a pilot for this show, and it exists somewhere, and I can
Well,
read it.
he co-wrote the pilot for
he
Bull.
co-wrote the pilot.
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
And I must tell you, there was a period, again, starting in March, where I met with him virtually every week for an hour, 2 hours, and we would just talk about trial science, something I knew nothing about. And it was fascinating. And a lot of him is in the sort of legal contours of the show. There is so much fascinating truth that you almost don't have to invent anything.
Yeah. And I think one of the, coming out of the gate, one of the mistakes, I think it was a mistake, is that people thought I was playing Dr. Phil and that this was somehow the story of Dr. Phil's. It's about a world that Dr. Phil understands incredibly well. But if, it's like if you were going to do a show about Roger Ailes, that would be kind of fascinating. But because Roger Ailes had his fingers in a lot of pots and who you calling a pot? He's dead now, right? We can say this. Right? Oh, wait, no, sorry, wrong direction, right? Yeah.
Could have said it while he was alive on this stage.
Anyway, I mean, I should stop while the.
I just want to talk about Roger Ailes for a little. No.
Sure, but I just think that there was this misunderstanding that the show was about a real person, and it's not. It's about a fictional guy with that ridiculous name, and the world that he's in, and what happened in season 1 is that the original creators really stepped away. And they hired a writer's room and they brought in a showrunner, but it wasn't organic match, I don't think, necessarily. And Mark Hoffman did a tremendous job of fashioning these shows, but you also had there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And I think we've all experienced that when your mother-in-law is in there and your wife's sister and
A lot of fingers in the pot.
He's good. Yeah. All right. He gets it. So I think we ended up with a very compelling, interesting show that I kept thinking that we needed something that would tie everything together, and that understanding the central character more and the other characters around him, and what was their relationship, and why do they work with each other, and that was really when we sat down and started talking about it. And we were talking about your film career, and you told fascinating. You tell great stories. He does a killer Warren Beatty impression as well, but we don't want to scare Warren. But talking about Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton and how that
Great movie.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's to write and direct a film like that, even if you never made anything else in your whole life, would be such an achievement. And I remember seeing that movie in the theater and going back and seeing it again. And much to my girlfriend's chagrin. But I wanted to understand what was going on there, and I didn't know that it was the moonlighting guy who had done it. But Michael Keaton pulled me in with that performance, and I think I now understand what was going on, is that Glenn gives you this opportunity to pour yourself into the scene, into the characters. And again, it doesn't always happen. So much television is presentational, and you're not really allowed to put yourself into it because it's strict,
It's sort of what you're saying is that the idea for a great procedural had been created, but a sort of an original tone hadn't been given to that.
I think absolutely.
That show.
Yeah, absolutely true. And so a friend of mine, we had a little premiere party for the cast and crew last night, and a friend of mine came, and he turned and he went, "It's season 1." So it really is, it's Bull Redux, and I think it's familiar, and it's still the same characters in this fascinating world, but now it really moves. I mean, I think that scene, just points to the idea that you can have a ball watching this show and not sit there and think, oh, I don't understand, what's a mirror jury, and how come the other jurors don't, who's talking into his ear? How does that work? We don't get worried with all the details.
Glenn, when Michael met with you, was one of the things he said was that he wanted the show to be funnier or more fun, or was that something that you brought to the table as having watched it?
Well, no, we didn't have that specific conversation. He sat down and he said, "What do you think of it?" Is sort of where we started. And I said, "I think there's a lot of great things there," because I honestly did. I thought as a point of departure for a television show, a lot of really good heavy lifting had been done. The thing that struck me was when I looked at the gallery of characters, starting with Michael and including all the other people on our show. We have some amazing people on our show, that there were this bunch of thoroughbreds, but they weren't really being given much opportunity to run. That the concentration, certainly through most of the first season, was so heavily on the technology and the cases that these really great actors were mostly sort of staring at screens and sharing clues and facts. And while that was interesting, I was really curious, what's it like to work for a guy like that? I mean, my experience and most of the research I've done is when you work for someone who sort of started a whole enterprise, started a business, invented a science, if you will, whether that person is Steve Jobs or Thomas Edison or whoever the heck it is, those people aren't easy to work for. They demand a lot. And yet, if you ask them, if you shoot them up with sodium pentothal, they'll tell you how generous they are. They're fascinating contradictions. And I thought, well, that must be the case here. And here's a guy who's in his middle 40s. He's pretty attractive. He's single. How the heck did that happen? And then I looked at all the other players, and I said, well, how did this person get here? And how did that person get here? How did that person get here? And I thought, if we can weave some of that into these scripts, because, yes, we watch every week for the cases, but I know personally, when I watch television, I watch because there's some character who's got a hold on me, who I'm fascinated by. So that was really largely the conversation we had. I said, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Wouldn't you want to do this? And I said, why? How do you know everything all the time? I find that obnoxious. I said, why hasn't somebody popped you? You know?
Parker Stevenson did pop me in the. You didn't see that episode.
Well, this goes back to what you were saying sort of at the beginning of this conversation, which is kind of like plot-based television is the thing that's kind of on in the background, and it starts, and we're like, oh, who did that? What's going to happen? And then you can just sort of leave it on and play it until the end, and you'd be like, oh, this person did it,
Right.
rather than this other one that popped up just in the middle of the show. Whereas when you invest in the characters in this way, people become they start laughing, they start
Right.
getting engaged, they care about them.
I think when you're like, if you walk up the aisle of an airplane on JetBlue or Southwest or whatever, and you're going to the lavatory in the back, and you go past conversations, each snippet of conversation hasn't been built just for you, and you're just walking by at the exact moment where someone gives you a plot point. You're catching random bits of real people's lives that feel authentic. And even if you don't totally understand what their lives are like, what they're even talking about, you know what they're talking about. And that is really, even if somebody's only in 2 scenes in an episode now of Bull, they have a purpose, they have a life, they're a full, the beginning, middle, and end they don't just offer you this one piece of lucky information that you just happen to catch. Because that, I find, as idiot-proof as some television can be, that drives me crazy, those conveniences. And what Glenn is really good at is actually turning that upside down. And Bull is almost waiting for someone to offer him the perfect, who's got the answer, and nobody's got the answer, which sets up the obstacle for the next interesting thing to happen, which is you have to go and truffle hunt yourself. The less easy you make it for the characters, not just the lead character and then everyone else is there to provide just infoplasm, that becomes a rich experience for the viewer. And like you're saying, you can't stop watching it because each conversation feels like it comes from a human being rather than a TV.
The other thing is when you embrace that sort of structure, which is to say no structure, the byproduct of that is hopefully the story is always surprising because it's not being navigated in predictable ways. And when you have a moment like we do right now, where you guys have 300 choices every day, you sit down and part of our obligation as storytellers, I believe, is to startle and surprise and do it in a way that feels like life. I mean, when you get up this morning, there are certain things you're going to do, but you don't know what the contour of the whole day is going to be. You don't know what's waiting for you at 3 o'clock or 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and neither does his character, neither do the people in the world around him. So to the extent that you can make the illusion of that happen, I think it creates very compelling storytelling. And the other thing we do is we don't adhere closely to the idea, well, this is a serious show. No, this is a funny show. No, this is a show, if you get inside these characters, if we get inside these characters, if we do our job, then from week to week, from scene to scene, we can do a drama, we can do a comedy, we can do a musical, we can do a costume drama, we can do anything. Because, when we get up in the morning, some days we get up and our lives are musical. And we go, hey, this is a pretty good day. And then there's some days we get up and we're filled with dread.
I know those days. That's Monday through Friday.
Anyway, that's what we aspire to. You guys will tell us if we're successful or not, but that's what we aspire to.
That's all great. Can we hear your Warren Beatty impression?
That would be a no.
Okay, let's get some questions from the audience then. Right here.
Hi, I was a huge NCIS fan, so when Bull was coming out, I was super excited. But in the first episode, I think it was, you had one of the clients call you boss. So I was just curious what it's like to play a Leroy Jethro kind of character.
Oh yeah, so it was an interesting, that was an added line on the pilot because I called Harmon's character Boss. I remember, when that first started happening, it was in the script. It was boss, 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 boss. And I said, I think I say boss 49 times in this one script. And Don Bellisario was like, and your question is? I'm like, well, yeah, but everyone knows he's the boss. Do I have to reinforce it that much? And he said, yes. And he said, but I'll tell you a secret. You can say it any way you like. And that is the gift of talented writing, is that, sometimes you see this limitation and it's actually this great thing. Now, to your question, I did get a little intimidated at the notion of playing a boss. And I think in the beginning of the first season, I felt that I needed to sort of not do as much and sort of try to be more in my head and less me in a way. Glenn has freed me of that notion that a boss must look and act a certain way. There's a lot of different bosses, and some weirdo, wacko boss like Bull is filled with enthusiasm and energy and passion for what he's doing. And he's a bull in a china shop, pardon the pun, but he does knock people over accidentally sometimes, on purpose maybe other times, but he's doing it for the purpose of this thing. And that's the boss that I'm really happy to find. And so now I think he's landed. I think we have a full Bull. I can see there's a little bull with glasses over there in that bag. But the experience is, I think I've now figured out how to be a boss, which is to say, don't try and be a boss. Be yourself. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, hi. Well, it's clear that you've taken the concept of the jury consultant and fictionalized it, but kept really truthfully to what a jury consultant does. I'm wondering how important it is to you to get the law part of the trials correct.
We sure try, and we have a ton of people who advise us and point us in the right direction when we're heading in the wrong directions. There are some times when we inadvertently err. The other thing you have to remember, too, is our show is set in New York and New York City. And there are certain peculiarities to the law from state to state, county to county. So sometimes I'll get a letter from a lawyer in Alabama saying, well, that wouldn't happen. But in fact, here in New York State, it would. So we do try to get as close as we can to the realities of the law. And when we err, and we do err, it's always accidental. It's not because we're trying to be flippant about that.
We were shooting a courtroom scene, and it was a mistake in the script, and the attorney was supposed to stand up and say objection, and then the judge scripted says sustained, and it was actually supposed to be overruled, but it was just because everyone, when she said sustained, everyone thought, but then we can't keep doing the scene. Because if the objection is sustained, then you can't continue the line of questioning. And the lawyer, we were in the middle of doing this, and nobody had noticed through blocking, through rehearsal, and we started shooting the master, and everyone was suddenly paying attention. And she, objection, sustained. And then the guy playing the lawyer went, well, if it's sustained, I can't say my next line. She has to say overruled. And so that does happen. I mean, even if something as funny and simple as that.
I'm hoping that was before me.
It was yesterday.
I think we have time for one more question. Where's the microphone? Right here.
I loved your character on NCIS, and I wonder, were you getting tired of playing that role? Or were you looking to leave the show, or did you leave because the opportunity presented itself?
It's so interesting that, 13 years in that character, and I had a huge journey and a lot of growth and had an enormous amount of fun and made lifelong friends. And, it's a whole lifetime, it's a whole experience. I got married, I had kids, lots of different things happened. But I did feel that the character had gotten to this narrower and narrower place. And I kind of feel the way Harrison Ford was talking about Han Solo. It's like, at a certain point, can we just kill Han Solo? Because, he was in the service of... I just started to think, I want to play Indiana Jones, I guess. I wanted to jump into a new point of view. And I felt like the way they handled Tony's departure from the show, where he became a father and he left, and for new responsibilities that were different, and he's on his own adventure somewhere out there in the TV ether. But I loved playing him, but I have to say that all that fulfillment that I got from that, I have found now on Bull, and I'm hoping that audiences can sense and feel that energy and that, not just the great writing, which is the thing, the engine inside it, but everything starts to come up when you have somebody like Glenn doing the job. So, thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Michael.
I hope they pay you. Shouldn't have brought that up.
Guys, congratulations on season 2. I know you're in the middle of shooting it. It premieres tomorrow night at 9 p.m.
Tonight.
I did this backstage with
Yes,
you, and
you
I
did.
screwed it up, and I screwed it up here. It's
It's
really
ju-
the one job I have.
No, we blame James Spader. We're just gonna blame
Yeah,
James
that's
Spader.
true. I'm still sort of locked in that world.
I
Sorry,
understand.
guys.
It's tonight, 9 o'clock, 8 Central. And I can promise you this. If you watch it with a friend or even a pet, you will learn something about each other through the program. I promise. There's information there.
Guys, give it up for Glenn and Michael. Let's hear it.